I call this talk the dynamic power of language plus heart. How to get your writing to light up in the slush pile in paragraph 1. I just want to mention, because I've sent so many things out over the last few years, that I know for awards, for submissions, sometimes it's as many as 2,000 are sent for one award or for one open submission for a literary review, for example. I write literary fiction at this point, but sometimes it's 500. But no matter what, 200. I mean, can you imagine? That's a lot of stuff to read. And so, how do you get your writing to stand out really? So let me just talk about it. So I'm going to talk, and then there's some couple things we might look at it in the handout, and then I'm hoping that we can do a little writing and have some Q&A as well. Let's see how it goes. So we often get carried away with form and content as writers. What point of view should I use? First, third, omniscient? What are the key plot points of my narrative? Do I even dare to write about this topic? Was a story about one woman's ocean voyage even matter to anyone else? These are all important questions. It's true. But there is something fundamental to writing that we too often forget. And that something is language. Language is our actual medium. We can't write without it. We neglect it at our own peril. I'd like you to take a moment now, right here, to think about your own personal relationship with language. Are you in love with it when you're writing? Thrilled by it when you're reading the language of someone else? Are you exhilarated by its possibilities? Excited to experiment with it? Are you motivated by its potential to create unforgettable art, to create sentences, lines, paragraphs, or whole pages that make the reader stop in their tracks? Or do you take it for granted, like a toothbrush to brush your teeth? If you're in love with something, you want to know and understand everything. You want to discover its nuances. You are energized by your engagement with it. I believe writers need to fall in love with language, the way a dancer does with her body, the way a potter does with his clay, a sculptor with their marble, or a painter with her paint. I'd like to talk to you about the natural resources of language itself, its music and texture, its rhythms and unexpected sound juxtapositions, and the original memorable image. On the other hand, even artful language is nothing if it is not anchored in the heart. This is where courage comes in. This is where compassion comes in. This is where vulnerability comes in. How deep are we willing to go to pull the emotional truth from ourselves? This talk will reintroduce you to what I call the art of languaging, the poetry of the sentence, the musical scoring of a page of writing, all of which will help you write that first riveting paragraph straight from your heart, the one that any reader, agent, editor, or publisher would be loath to put. You've got to read this, they will tell anyone in earshot. So, first of all, I kind of want to find out who we have here. Can you raise your hand if you're a poet? Got a few poets here. How about memoirists? Fiction writers? Ooh. Competing with me. Journalists?
Oh, no. What kind of journals?
Any kind of journalists.
Okay.
People who tweeters? No. So a little bit about me, so you have a sense of where I'm coming from. My writing experience over the years has run the gamut. I've written and published poems, personal essays, nonfiction, and short fiction, and dabbled at playwriting as well. But I started out as a poet, and that has been key. And one of the reasons why I believe my stories have so often stood out in the slush pile. I got my first master's in poetry. Then, while raising two sons, 10 years apart, the first as a single mother, I published a nonfiction book about motherhood with a New York publisher. During my parenting years, I published personal essays in the San Francisco Chronicle magazine on things that figured prominently in my life as a mother, because I was writing what I had to write. I was writing from my heart. I wrote about teenage gun violence in San Francisco because that violence had touched my own son's life, and thus mine. He lived. I wrote about what it takes to make a difference in our inner city schools as a parent volunteer because my second son wound up in an elementary school that was struggling. I wrote about how proud and bereft I felt when my first son got his driver's license at 15 and started to leave me. But once the youngest was in high school, I went back to school myself and got an MFA in fiction. That was in my late 50s. For the past 10 years, short fiction has been my passion and my focus. Yet I have never lost my poet's sensibility and my love of language. Dozens of readers responded to my personal essay about teenage gun violence, many of whom had lost their own children. They spoke of the essay's power and how much it meant to them. But they also remarked on how beautifully written it is. It's not the topic alone that makes a piece of writing memorable. It's how it gets written. Everything I do and everything I teach is based on what I call the writing faith. That's F-A-I-T-H, the writing faith. The writing faith is a trust that we develop over time. But like any faith, it can also come to us in an instant. The writing faith means trusting in your own voice. It means trusting our own content, our emotional landscapes, our fantasies and ideas, our memories. Faith, I learned, lies in a place even deeper than belief. That was a hard one. As writers, we will all experience moments of doubt when we hit rock bottom. I know I did, more than once. This is when the writing faith is most important. My writing faith liberates me from doubt and fear. Not all the time, but in those hours when I'm alone with the page. My writing faith guarantees this learned truth. I will always write what I need to write. Intuitive writing, or free writing, is the first step. I give myself permission to fling open all doors, follow all trails or scents, that's S-C-E-N-T, scents, come what may. The attitude is, let's see what happens. Let's just see what happens on the page. Revision is another story, another chapter. I will have plenty of time to puzzle that out. It took me over 6 years to finish the stories that are in my book, just to be the sense. I'll have plenty of time to puzzle out how to develop these things. But for now, my job is to let her rip, let her fly, keep her lit with no agenda, allowing myself not to know in order to discover something, an idea, a storyline, an emotion, a memory long ago. This is where I begin, and where I encourage you to begin. Whether you're starting a project, feeling stuck with a project, or in the middle of it, or even at the end. Only when I give myself this freedom, this permission, this letting go, do I discover after a writing session that I have reaped rich compost, that I have written from my heart, not my head. It is always there, like nuggets of gold. Without that initial fertile energy, there is little to go on. the head gets overly involved. The censors suddenly appear like a stern jury in a courtroom. So first of all, my advice to all of you, in whatever genre and in whatever level of experience, is to practice the writing faith. I give it to you now. Where's my copy? I give it to you now with my magic wand. You never need fear the blank page again. Now that you will know that you always write what you need to. So let's talk about dynamism in writing for a moment. What does the word dynamic even mean? The dictionary tells us that if something is dynamic, it is a force that stimulates change. The key words here are force, or energy, and stimulating, which means arousing interest and enthusiasm. And what, pray tell, is the opposite? Boring, dull, unstimulating. The other key word in the definition of dynamic is the word change. Change refers to ways the writer has changed by writing what they have written, as well as ways the reader changes by reading it. What do you want? What do we want when we read? We want something dynamic on the page, as if the paper itself, with its tiny black letters, were radiating energy. I don't believe that there is good writing or bad writing. I experience words on the page as energy. That is always what I'm looking for. I believe powerful original writing starts with knowing what a poet knows about language. Poets are the shamans of language, all over the world and all through time. Learning what a poet knows is guaranteed to bring energy and originality to your sentences, no matter what genre you are working. So let's look at some of that. What are some of the things that poets are especially aware of? I'd like to ask you. Raise your hand. Yeah.
Sound.
Sound. Other ideas? Poets and not poets. Yeah.
Color.
Color. Awesome. Yeah.
Imagery. Rhythm.
Rhythm.
Imagery.
Imagery. Anyone want to shout out anything else about? Well, you know, the only thing that makes a poem versus all the other genres is that it's written in line. It's the only genre that's written in line. A line doesn't go all the way across the page. All prose, fiction and nonfiction, goes across the page. And that's a really key thing about poetry. And when we're going to talk about sound and rhythm, is, you know, that you have to decide where to end the line. It might be in the middle of an idea, but there's a pause, and that's part of the musical scoring that I'm going to talk about. So yeah, so image, metaphor, music, musical texture of language. So look at the power of the image. The ability to write original, vivid images starts with the senses. Perceiving ourselves and the world through touch, smell, sounds, taste, visual details, nuances of light. I always like to remind my students how important light is in description. Art is fundamentally about paying attention to the world inside of us and the world outside of us. I always encourage my students to journal as a way of paying attention, to sleuth the physical world, to notice things others pass over, to look at things differently than they usually do, even to lick what they normally touch, to touch what they normally smell, to really study what they're about to taste, and then to translate these noticings regularly into language. Of course, for a writer, this last bit is key. This translation of what is not language, what is experience into language. The senses ground our writing. They give us a place to inhabit. Everything happens somewhere. So where is it? Tell us. Simple sensory details complicate into image. One of my earliest teachers, the poet Stan Rice at San Francisco State University, taught us to think of poetry as the cinema of thought. The physical, treated with rapture, come up to the level of idea. I think of my prose in the same way. To think of prose as a cinema of thought. The physical, treated with rapture, come up to the level of idea. Physical images go beyond mere description. They carry emotional weight. What a narrator, what a persona of a poem or a character perceives and how they perceive it can be revelatory. This is language at its best, working full time. Because in the end, after all those years of revision, you want to have left on the page only the words that need to be there and the music that you want the reader to hear. We feel sensory images in the body. And because we feel them in the body, we don't forget. We feel them viscerally in our mouths, on our skin, in our gut. They become part of us. Here are a few examples from the handouts, which you don't need to look at because you can look at them later too. But I'm just going to mention, this is from Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye. Got the quote, the hands that wrung the necks of chickens. No, you don't even look at your things. I would just listen to me. So these are the examples. This will look later. The hands that wrung the necks of chickens and butchered hogs also nudged African violets into bloom. This is poet Tracy Smith in a poem that's in your handout about her dying father. A room where we'd listen for the rise of breath, the burble in his throat. A poem from a poem by Al Young, also in the handout. The easy, erasable, troubled voices a whirling ceiling fan makes in deep summer nights in hot, unheavenly hotels. And that's last one, also Tracy Smith, who is pregnant. And she writes, I lay sprawled like a big game rug across the bed.
Self-picture me doing that.
Okay. Listen again to these images. Sprawled like a big game rug. A simile, right? A comparison. The troubled voices of a whirling fan. Figurative language. A whirling fan doesn't literally have a voice. These are physical images converging in a kind of alchemy into the figurative, which brings us to metaphor, a poet's favorite tool. Metaphor, or simile, is the mother lode of poetry, but not just poetry. An original, accurate metaphor is gripping in all genres of writing. And what is metaphor other than an image? Metaphor is the creation of resemblance by the imagination. That's a definition by poet Wallace Stevens. Metaphor is the creation of resemblance by the imagination. Metaphor is the unfamiliar, things you can barely talk about, we can't figure out how to describe them, like love or God. The unfamiliar in terms of the familiar. And the familiar is an image, a specific, detailed image. A metaphor is an exquisite, inventive equation that releases energy like heat. X equals Y. Example, love is knit dinner plates on the shelf, livestock on a city building, a snow-capped peak. Simile and metaphor create comparisons, and comparisons excite the intellect. In the end, this is always what I'm going for, as well as what I like to read. Writing that has sensory, emotional, and intellectual energy. Writing that reaches and electrifies. And that's important, reaches and electrifies my mind, my body, and my heart. So what about language as music? In addition to their precise and original use of image and metaphor based in their exquisite attention to the details of their lives, all of which we can use to great benefit in whatever we are writing, poets are also aware of the dynamic power of language as sound, as he said. Language is music. It can't help itself. It is a series of sounds and sound relationships. But is it interesting music that you want to listen to, delight in, hear out loud? Or is it boring music that causes your mind to wander? Or so familiar in its expected riffs, it puts you to sleep? Music is one of the natural resources of language that I find writers often ignore or do not pay enough attention to. So let's think about language as music. And I'd like you to think of ways that we talk about music. What are some of the words that a musician can use, or just a listener to music might use? Can you just raise your hand and say, you talk about music? Yeah.
Tempo.
Tempo.
Cadence.
Cadence.
Volume.
Volume.
Fluidity.
Fluidity.
Repetition.
Repetition, which is like a chorus or refrain, often is called in music. What are some other things? Okay. Beat. Harmony, nice. And disharmony, too. Melody. Great, yeah, all of these. It's all the things you said. Speed and rhythms. It's legato, allegro, pianissimo, fortissimo. We can talk about language the same way. That's what I'm here to tell you today. We can use the same words that we use to talk about music, about our language. How sound creates meaning beyond rhetorical meaning. You know what I mean by rhetorical meaning? The meaning in the dictionary. That sound on a page, if you could forget all the meanings of the words, is creating its own map of sound, its own composition of sound. So it's how sound creates meaning beyond rhetorical meaning, how it impacts us, the readers, the listeners, regardless of the content. The music inherent in language impacts emotional tone and adds dynamism to our writing. We can cultivate the ear of a musician and simply become more aware of it. So let's think of some individual words as examples and consider why we experience them so differently on the level of sound. So I'm going to need you for this. Dark. Okay, I'll just try to be very neutral when I say dark, light. Dark, light. Just sound. How are they different? Does anyone notice something?
One's heavy.
Pardon me?
One is heavy.
Which one?
Dark.
Anyone else? It's okay. And does anyone know, like, what are the sounds that are making it? In this case, heavy or something else? Yes.
I was going to say, when you say the word dark, your voice drops. When you say the word light, it seems to flow up.
Yeah, and I wonder why that is. That's interesting. What is happening actually in terms of the little sounds within? Like, what are the vowels doing? What are the consonants doing? Because words are made up of letters, and each one has its own sound.
You say the word dark, your mouth kind of closes a bit.
Mm-hmm.
You say the word light, things a little bit as a mechanic.
Yeah, I mean, that's great listening. Does anyone else have an idea? You wanna add?
Hard consonants, like dark is more staccato,
Mm-hmm.
dark, just is, whereas light, kind of floats more, it's lighter.
Yeah, it's lighter. It's lighter and brighter. So what's making lighter and brighter? It's that long eye. It's the long eye, that eye. It's so opening. It's so, and even though it ends with a T, a concept, but it starts with a love, which is very different. So it's light and dark. It starts with a D, and then with a K. You can't get anything harder than that. Although you do have the R with a K that changes a little bit. So it's like if you just think DAC is different than dark. And then maybe some of you really had an insight in that in terms of it closing, because the sound itself is closing, not just the mouth. Dark. It's almost like it's eating itself. And what is it eating? It's eating the light. That's why it's dark. How about hard? Soft. Hard. Soft. Some different people who haven't said anything want to raise your hand. How are those different? Can you tell what's happening like in the middle? By the way, dark, there was not a long A in dark. It's a short A. Other would be like dank. Like there's no word for the dare. I can't even say it. But dank has a really dark is also darker. Because those short vowels aren't there. Then the long vowel E, O, I, U. So what about hard, soft? Anything? Yeah.
But you have your soft consonants versus your hard consonants, like your, when my children were in like learning, my children have learning disabilities.
Yeah.
So they talk about the soft consonants.
Yeah.
The soft, that F.
That F.
And then hard, again, it's the, short and hard, or hard. I'm saying two words.
It's hard. Hard.
Hard, yeah,
Yeah.
so it's just, it's closing down like dark,
Yeah, you're right. It seems to be closing down like dark.
more staccato, and the other one is you were kind of expanding.
Yeah.
You were to make the sound with their mouths,
Nice.
so that's what they learned, and it's similar to when they used to teach economics.
Yeah.
I'm stating myself, but that's how I learned with phonics, so
Yeah.
how to sound out of word.
Well, we all need to relearn
Oh, yeah.
phonics. Because that's what this is about.
Yeah,
So thank you for that. Soft starts with a sibilant F. Nothing. No hard consonants. So it's a soft entry. And look what the F does to the T. It takes away the hard T, the punctuation of the T. Because just think soft. If it was, that would have the same soft entries. But it doesn't have any soft. Yeah.
The sounds in soft are all made in the front of the mouth. Soft. In the front. Dark is made from the middle of the mouth all the way to.
Wow. See, I need a physiology teacher to add to this, but that's great. To just not recognize what the actual mouth is doing. So this F softens the T in soft. And so just, I just wanted to spend time with at least a couple just to give you the idea, because each of your names is music, and it's definitely different from one to the other. Jimmy, Linda, different. They have different feelings. They have different emotions. Mean, nice, sharp, dull. We can become a lot more aware of everything I'm saying right now. I'm just making sound relationships to you. Hopefully you can decipher them. So what is happening on the level of sound? The phonemes, the accented and unaccented syllables. Because you realize when you say something, and this is where people who are learning English as a second language, and we do the same when we're learning a foreign language, you can often tell their English might be perfect in terms of knowing the vocabulary, but their stresses are in places different places. Just a reminder that in fact, everything is the level of sound. Of is not stressed. The level, the second syllable of level is not stressed, but the la is and sound is the level of sound. And that's happening all the time. So we're listening to the phonemes, the accented and unaccented syllables, the rhyming and off rhyming, internal rhyming, a weaving of sounds. Then the phrasing, the musical measures, sounds as they accumulate and respond to each other, contrasting or echoing. Rhythm, someone mentioned rhythm. Rhythm is created by musical scoring. Punctuation, like the 16th note, quarter note, a half note. You have the comma, 16th note, the period, or maybe let's say the semicolon, quarter note, the period, half note, the ellipsis, the half note, and so on. The length of a sentence in relation to the one before it and after it creates music. It creates rhythm. It creates a kind of orchestration on the page. Whether the sentence is melodious or spare. Once you recognize you are writing a musical score, as well as an essay, poem, or story, you can embrace yourself as a composer. You can work on developing the ear of a musician, the ear of a poet. So I'd like us to take a little time out. Now we can. So if you look at the handout, why don't we? What I thought we could do is have someone just read out loud that first poem, just so we can hear it. The Speed of Belief. No, not the. I'm sorry, not the Speed of Belief. The first one is Who I Am in Twilight. So there's two things on one side and two on the other. Can someone just sort of stand up and read Who I'm in Twilight? And I'd like everyone else to close your eyes and just listen to the music. Someone like to volunteer? Go for it.
Like John Lee Hooker, like Lightnin' Hopkins, like the blues himself, the trickster sonnet, hoedown, the tango, the canto jondo, like blessed spirituals and ragas custom made, like sagas, like stories, like slick, slow, sly soliloquies, sliding into dramas, like Crime and Punishment, like death and birth, Canal Street, New Orleans, like the easy, erasable, troubled voices of a whirling ceiling fan mixing deep summer nights in hot, unheavenly hotels, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Tennessee, like the Mississippi River, so deep, wide, you couldn't get a letter to the other side, like Grand Canyon, like Yosemite National Park, like beans and cornbread, like rest and recreation, like love and life. I know we last. I know our bleeding spots.
Nice, thank you. So just off the cuff, just briefly even, I'd like to people to just say, what are some things you're noticing that have this happening in here musically? You know, rhythm, rhyme, all the things that we talked about.
There's the feeling of crescendo and then diminuendo.
Okay, great. It's a, you know, the whole thing, who I am in Twilight, the whole thing is a metaphor, right? The equation here, X, me at twilight, or, you know, the persona of the poem at twilight, Y, all these things. He's trying to get at some experience that he is at this interesting transitional hour of a day, right? And this is what it comes. Obviously, he has a lot of music inside him. He's actually specifically talks about singers and so on. But so, what are some other things? There's so much here happening on the level sound.
And the rhythm of the alliteration. I love the part like sagas, like stories, like slick, slow, sly soliloquies, sliding in the drums.
Yeah, right.
I mean, you can almost see it, you know, sliding kind of like a roller coaster.
Sliding.
Yeah, and I love that sagas rhymes with ragas in the line right above it.
Yeah.
And then if he'd gone on, might have become almost too cute, too much, too distracting. But instead, he shifts like crime and punishment. Whoa, okay, that takes you into a different, headspace.
Yeah.
Other things? Does anyone want to say? Some other things you noticed?
A lot of similes.
Okay, what are some examples?
That create a face that starts with like. And
Well, the whole thing is that, yeah, you're right. Because he's like, I said metaphor, but they're really similes. You're basically pointing that out too. That, well, I'm in Twilight, I'm like John Lee Hooker, I'm like Lightning Hawkins, I'm like the blues himself. Did you want to say something more? Oh, yeah. So there's that repetition of like, though. So there's like throughout. I mean, you can count them all about 24. So there's that repetition. If like in music, if you have this particular note, you keep hearing that note, coming back to that note. And your ear likes that. It says, oh, I remember that note. That note's becoming familiar. There's a pattern. That interests me. There's tango and canto and dongo. Like those are all those internal rhymes going on and on and on. I mean, we could go on and on about it. I'd like to take a moment to look at least the first paragraph of Toni Morrison, because then I'd like you to have a little time to write. So I'm just going to read that beginning, but I'd like you to think about as I'm reading, or just listen to the sounds, what's happening on the level of sound musically. So this was prose. So I wanted to have, one poem and a piece of prose. They hugged the memories of illnesses to their bosoms. They licked their lips and clucked their tongues in fond remembrance of pains they had endured. Childbirth, rheumatism, croup, sprains, backaches, piles. All the bruises they had collected from moving about the earth. Harvesting, cleaning, hoisting, pinching, stooping, kneeling, picking, always with young underfoot. But they had been young once. The odor of their armpits and haunches had mingled into a lovely musk. Their eyes had been furtive, their lips relaxed, and the delicate turn of their heads on those slim black necks had been like nothing other than a doze. Their laughter had been more touch than sound. Do you like it? Do you like listening to it? It's fucking awesome. Toni Morrison is, a big woman because of her. I mean, she's just been brilliant. She was brilliant. And I don't know that she wrote poetry, but all the things I'm talking about are here in her prose. And if that comes across the desk, it definitely lights up in the slush pile. Whoa! What all there's stuff going on there. But it's also, there's so much art in it, right? Because what I said how important that is too. The heart, the human condition. But that's there too. It's not just all fluffy music, but there's also grounded in its musical texture. So what are some of the things that you notice there, here? Do you notice any rhyming, echoes of sound, any kind of anything that you could think of as musical?
All the words that end in ing. Harvesting,
Nice, yeah. And that's so important when you get down to like a gerund or that present participle, whatever that is, because I'm not an expert in grammar. It's something that's continuous and it's all happening. She's making it actively happening and she's repeating. And in addition, it's a list with a comma. Remember I said about the comma is like a quarter note. So there's a pause. Harvesting, cleaning. It's not harvesting, pinning, hoisting, pinching, stooping. It's harvesting, cleaning, hoisting, pinching, stooping, kneeling, picking. So you feel the labor You feel the labor in the accumulation of these verbs. Those are each one very specific, relating to something real that these women did. And similarly, there's childbirth, rheumatism, croup, sprains, backaches, piles. I love that collect their tongues in fond remembrance of pains they had endured, and then we have sprains. We don't necessarily always notice that. I mean, I noticed all those things because I've been really paying attention to it for a long time. But I'm just reminding you that you too can develop more, wherever you're at now in terms of your musical ear. You can develop it more by simply even just taking time tonight or later, reading over the things that on this handout and just looking for the things that I've been talking about in the listening. And noticing things like metaphor and simile, sensory image, original image, and also listening to the sounds. They hug the memories of illness to their bosoms, to their bosoms. So there's also the stress and non-stress. Now, I just want you to at least hear, they hug the memories of illnesses to their bosoms. They lick their lips and
Lost
clasp
the microphone.
their tongues in fond remembrance of the pains they had endured. Isn't that amazing? There's all that stress and unstressed syllables that are adding, contributing to the rhythm and the music of what's going on, as well as all the things that we mentioned, and more. So, could you get out a pen and a paper? Let's do a little one. Just for 5 minutes. With all this in mind, in heart. Does everybody have something that you can quickly pull out?
Is everybody good?
Okay, so we're gonna go right into it because it's now or never. So what I'd like you to do first, just for 2 or 3 minutes, is simply write a list of I remembers. So you're gonna just write, I remember, and then let something come up. It could be an image. I remember the aquamarine of my mother's eyes when she got angry. I remember, it could be a place. I remember the whiteness on the top of Mount Bachelor in April. It could be an incident. It could be a person. I remember Lucy, my mother's best friend. Just so short like that. So just go ahead. So I remember. Just a list. Anything from your life. It could be from when you're little, when you're 2, 8, 15, 40. Yes, you know. We always had, I suggested the writing phase is that you always write when you need to write. So you don't need to think. Nothing matters. Just you let it go out. Let your heart let things out of you. Almost like you're channeling. So now we don't have to write a lot about them, just a phrase, maybe a sentence for each one. Take another minute. You're doing fantastically. You have 10 seconds. Just let things come out of you. A place, an image, an incident, person. Okay, great. So just finish with whatever you were writing now. Okay, I want you to look at the list and select one, or let one select you, and just put a check by it. One from my list. Just wrote a list, and you're just going to look at them all, and one of them is going to stand out. Just select that. Okay, now I want you to put that on the top, of the next area of blank page. Just put that on the top like it's a title. Like it's a title of whatever's going to come next. Okay, so whatever you selected, that one, put it as a title. Okay, and now, and then in a moment, we're just going to take 5 minutes to write a couple paragraphs describing this moment, or if it's a person, a moment with the person. We're going for vividness. So I'd like you to use all the senses. And because of that, I'd like you to write under somewhere on the page on the top, all the senses, please, right now. Just write them down. Smell, sound, touch or texture, visual, taste comes in less frequently, but it might come in your case. And don't forget, what was the thing I said not to forget? Do you remember? Light. Excellent. Light. What was the light like? What is the light like? So I just like you to just, without thinking, without worrying, just to write a couple paragraphs describing this moment. You can bring in the camera close and a magnified moment. It may include a reflection or discovery or some unexpected association, whatever comes. Just let the cat out of the cage and let her rip. Use all the senses somehow. See if you can use all the senses and just write that moment. Okay, if I'm remember to practice the writing thing. I already gave it to you. You always write what you need to write, so there's nothing to be concerned about. Just let something happen on the page. Include those details of the sentence. Just a couple paragraphs. You have 3 more minutes. Okay, you have 1 minute. Okay, so then I can just finish the sentence you're on. Finish the sentence you're on, and then I'd like you just to quietly to yourself, read it through. Just listen to it, the sound of it, like read it through to yourself. And notice what's happening on the level of sound, rhythm, and see if you want to change anything sound-wise, just for 1 minute. Or if it just feels just fine. On the level of sound. Okay, great. So I can't wait to hear. Then we have a couple volunteers just to stand up and read loud and clear, just what you wrote, so you just hear what happened.
Yay. Prom's coming up soon, right?
Okay, here.
25 years ago. I remember the care as you designed your prom date's wrist corsage, choosing the sweet smell of delicate orange blossoms over the sterile glamour of orchids. Your eyes softened as you touched the soft white petals' creamy surface, the awe in your voice when you said, "This one." The shadows of the flower shop on the chapel.
Another one. Wanna stand up? Yay. There's no fear here.
No fear. The fog cleared as my father donned his helmet. His 6'2" slim frame stepped into the Red Lotus Super 7. There were no doors. He turned the key, the engine roared, spitting out exhaust fumes, smelling like happiness. His deep blue eyes lit up, his blonde hair trying to escape from his helmet. The car wheeled through the corners around each pylon, screeching to a stop. Finally screeching to a stop. I greeted him, running my hands lovingly across the hood, the heat turning my hands red. He was smiling.
Nice. Running my hands across the hood. I love the sound of it. They're running my hands across the hood. The music in that and all of it. Awesome. Another one. Let's have at least one more. Come on. I came all the way to San Francisco to hear you. Don't be driving up yourselves.
I remember the sweet honey dripping slowly, all golden from the walnuts spoon.
Wait, actually, you know what? Good, come up here and face everybody. So they can-
Oh,
just so they can hear you better.
oh,
Stand on the tip.
No, just because you're back, just.
Oh, okay. But the people that can't see you, they're online.
that's all right. Where do you want?
Wanna come over here? Come on, now.
Oh, then I get to stand by. That's. All right.
Here she is.
I remember the sweet honey dripping slowly, all golden from the walnut spoon, black walnut, dark and musty, sweetened now by the sticky syrup Carl harvested from the orchard bees, and rose hot from summer, sticky from sweat, hungry for sweetness, her cotton dress clinging to her thick waist.
But that's great. Do you feel it? The energy? I mean, I want you to really think about language as energy, not as good writing, bad writing. That's like passe, that idea. Don't even think of yourself. Am I a good writer, bad writer? No, some of your writing has more energy than other writing. Work with the energy. Let it all out. Find the energy. Use the energy. But those, I could feel them in my body. They're visceral, physical, sensory images that absolutely take us there. And then I'm going to always remember. Right? I'm going to always remember that handwriting. That honey, I'm going to always remember the delicate softness of that cream corsage. It's forever because of how they wrote those. So, in summary, I mean, if we had more time, you could get in little small groups and you could all read them together. That'd be awesome. But instead, you can just go to a bar and do this and do that there. Do that there. And just everyone will just start crowding around because they'll want to hear it too. And they'll share their beer. So, in summary, the art of languaging, knowing what a poet knows about language, will cause your prose to light up in the slush pile in the first paragraph. I would totally, these three that we just heard, I'm definitely giving it to my editors. I'm passing it to the next level. I'm interested. It's happening. Never underestimate the power of a first sentence. This is the first sentence of the bluest eye. Nuns go by as quiet as lust, and drunken men with sober eyes sing in the lobby of the Greek hotel. Remember the writing thing. Thank you. We're late, and so we have at least 1 minute, if not more, to answer any questions you have that might have been provoked by what I was talking about. If it's all right with my, yeah.
First of all, I thank you for an excellent presentation. It's giving us so much to think about
Oh,
in this
great.
area. My question is if you or other scholars with whom you're familiar might have done similar work with older languages. I'm thinking, for example, of Chinese, the 4 different tones, and how that can make a difference in the language. One tone can be the same word, different, one tone change can make a
Right,
difference.
Well, I'm fluent in Italian because I lived in Italy. Allora parlo italiano. Fluentemente. Anche tu. So, it's true in every language. The poets, the Italian poets, the Chinese, they're gonna ideally be very aware of all the tonalities and sounds and how that comes out in their writing, no question. I mean, I hope they are. That's what I'm encouraging for prose writers in whatever language. It's music, whatever language it is. Does anyone else have a question? Yeah.
I think it's difficult to translate literature from one language to another, because if you do it literally, you lose a lot of the cadence and the richness. And yet, if the translator takes too much liberty with the text, he becomes writing his own book and not, being faithful to the author. So I think that brings up an interesting.
Well, it's a challenge. I've translated Italian poetry, and I am all for poets translating or fiction writers translating fiction, and not scholars. And I'm hoping that they'll just be able to find the balance between those two. And the great translators do. They have to know the manuscript so well that they're like almost become like an actor becoming the character on stage so that they can feel now in the language how to reproduce as much as possible of so many layers, right? Associations of meaning and sound, rhythm, slang, and so on. Yeah. Couple other questions, and then we'll call it a day. Yes.
It kind of relates to how differently we experience spoken word versus reading the word on the page.
Mhm.
And I was wondering if you could just kind of, as we approach writing with what a poet knows, right?
Yes.
Should we orient around the words being spoken, or perhaps, or where our words are most often experienced? Kind of thing. Can I talk about all that?
Yeah, all that. I always listen to my work out loud. I record my work out loud. I record my stuff and then I listen back to it, and that helps me revise or see if it's happened, if things are working. And I personally would be in my own prejudices of what I like to read, what I told you, that where there's this awareness of the sounds of language, but also where I'm touched in my heart, my mind, my body, that I think those language that's doing that is going to be fantastic silently on the page, and it's going to be marvelous spoken out loud. Both. Like I just read about the nuns and the lust. You know, if you just read it silently in the room, you'd also be like, holy moly, how'd you do that?
So to piggyback on that, so you send something into an editor and they're gonna be reading it as quickly as they can silently. I mean, they may not hear the
Well,
sound.
you hear it in your head though, you hear it in you too.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's what I want you to notice. That's your homework. When you're reading, I want you to notice the music as you're reading silently. Because I always thought it was so miraculous that, like, I don't even get how that works because I'm not a neurologist or brain specialist. How, when I'm reading, it's like I'm hearing the words in my head. I don't know how that happens, but it does happen.
And then try and read an academic paper right after. Hard to read because it doesn't flow.
Usually not. Usually not, you know.
Yeah.
But the academic papers and the lawyer, I've worked, somewhat with lawyers, if their briefs can be so dull, or they could be really exciting, but there's a lot more to say. That's a whole other lecture. How to, drive the narrative and language in your lawyer brief. But I'll be in the back if anyone would like to ask any more questions. Personally, to me, my book, The Man with the Appears of Legs, I brought a few copies. Happy to sign it for you. I think it's $16.95, but when I'm on tour, $15 is fine. And information on my writing classes and workshops that I offer, which are all hybrids. So I do have in person as well as people on Zoom. So that's it. Thanks so much for being here.